Welcome to Boris's Best of British Bulletin, Episode 7, 21st of August 2020. New Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross had a great weekend. He got to indulge his passion for football by being a linesman at a Scottish Premier League game. Meanwhile, there were VJ Day commemorations going on in his constituency, which were much less important than football. Thankfully, there was a Scottish National Party MSP on hand to attend and show that at least some local politicians actually gave a flying fuck about the heroic sacrifices made by our brave veterans to ensure our freedom. Mr. Ross has promised to give up refereeing if he ever becomes First Minister, so at least he can look forward to a long career as a referee. Not content with disrespecting the heroic sacrifice of our veterans, he then elevated himself to the lofty heights of internet troll. Yes, Mr. Ross congratulated both India and Pakistan on the anniversary of each country's respective independence days, marking their departure from colonial British rule, all while simultaneously leading the branch office of a party that would deny his own country the very same thing. I can't wait to see his coupon next year when he has to wish our UK a happy Independence Day. I also can't wait to see what he gets up to this weekend. Matt Hancock announced that he was going to scrap Public Health England and replace it with a pandemic preparedness body. And the leader of that new body is, unsurprisingly, Baroness Dido fucking Harding. And who the fuck is that, I hear you ask? Well, she's the same Dido fucking Harding that used to run TalkTalk, which during her tenure suffered a massive data leak, during which up to 150,000 customers' banking details were accessed. And she didn't know if customers' data was encrypted or not. Almost too predictably, running this new body will put her in charge of lots of citizens' sensitive personal data. How reassuring. Just in case anyone isn't sure, it's the same Dido fucking Harding that had spent £13 million of our money on a track and trace app that didn't work, when Ireland got a fully functional one for the bargain price of £773,000. And yet Dido fucking Harding still tried to claim it wasn't a failure. It was of course such a success, it was scrapped immediately, and crucially without publishing any accounts of where the £13 million went. Just to be doubly sure, it's the same Dido fucking Harding who's poured £100 million of our money into massive outsourcing firms and Tory donors Serco and Sitel for totally ineffective contact tracing, only to be outshone when a few local councils set up their own operations, with their own staff and no extra funding, and traced 98% of all their contacts. Her test and trace programme has been described as not fit for purpose, let alone world-beating, by the chair of NHS providers. And just in case there's some minuscule little bit of doubt, it's the same Dido fucking Harding who was a senior official in the Jockey Club and lobbied to still run the Cheltenham Horse Racing Festival, which many scientists believe accelerated the initial COVID-19 outbreak. The Evening Standard, a Tory supporting paper, wrote of her, Dido Harding's utter ignorance is a lesson to us all. I wonder what the due diligence process was when deciding who should run this body. Did they advertise a position? If so, who else applied? What were their qualifications? And what stood out about Baroness Dido fucking Harding? So just to be clear for the audience, it's not the singer Dido, Rollo's sister, the nice singer with the pretty face and the early falsetto who was sampled by Eminem. It's the incompetent, but clearly well connected, Baroness Dido fucking Harding, whose husband is a Tory MP and sits in a body which wants to replace the NHS with a US-style insured model. Also, her husband is, get this, is a government anti-corruption champion. Quite frankly, I think I'd rather have the singer Dido in charge of the whole thing. I mean, handing it over to Dido fucking Harding feels kind of like asking Jimmy Savile to babysit your kids. The government announced quarantine for people returning from France. Predictably, they waited until everyone had made travel plans and then pulled the policy forward 24 hours. And then an MP, using the name Grant Shapps, helpfully told everyone the wrong date for the start of quarantine. Irony's own Bermuda Triangle, Priti Patel, said, migrants were only coming here because French people are all racist and Germans torture people. This was mere days after the Ministry of Defence said Patel's plans for channel protection were completely potty, and the UN said her ideas were very troubling and would cause fatal incidents. The Navy then refused to send warships into the channel. Yes, you did hear that correctly. The Navy have basically told the Home Secretary to fuck off. Well done, Navy. Education Secretary Gavin Williamson started the week modestly with a cheery pledge to starve 175,000 children of immigrants by stopping their free meals while their families cannot legally work or claim benefits. All the way back in the mists of time, the government instructed Ofqual to tell teachers to spend hours per pupil creating estimated grades, which were to be reviewed and approved by head teachers. Gavin Williamson is on record instructing Ofqual to design a system that could not allow grade inflation. But this week, he predictably blamed Ofqual for, you've guessed it, designing a system that did not allow grade inflation. But thankfully, private schools did get grade inflation, an average of 8 times the increase state schools got. The Times reports that the government still plans to use the algorithm for GCSEs, but will not downgrade any results. They'll only upgrade them, which only benefits private schools. The Minister of Innovation said, A-levels don't matter as much as grit and determination, as he reports his A-level failures at the posh school Harrow taught me how to hustle. But he is also the 5th Lord Bethan, and hustled his way to a hereditary peerage with the grit and determination required to patiently wait for your father to die. Good hustling, dude. Winston Churchill's grandson, a Tory MP, said of Gavin Williamson, what could have been in the Prime Minister's mind that led him to appoint so mere, so unreliable, so wholly unsuitable a man to one of the most important jobs in government? A more poetic Tory MP said the government was wanking into the void. There are now calls for Ofqual to be abolished and replaced with something that will probably be worse. But as yet, no news on which unqualified but vaguely aristocratic Tory MP's wife will run it. I'll keep you posted. The government had 5 months to plan and execute one exam policy affecting 335,000 pupils. The government now has 4 months to execute over 2,000 Brexit policies affecting 67 million of us and every business in the country. Hey, at least we can all eat bendy bananas at the end of the year, though, eh? Trade Secretary and part-time punchline Liz Truss promised, I will consign these unfair tariffs to the bin of history when she makes her stern demands on a trade deal between the USA, the world's biggest economy, and the UK, 2% of global trade. I bet the USA is shitting itself. Meanwhile, after Liz Truss sang the praises of a potential deal with New Zealand, worth 4% of the trade we will lose after a no-deal Brexit, the New Zealand Deputy Prime Minister said, Britain is not match fit for trade talks and was beset with inertia. The money spent on utterly useless PPE rose from a mere £50 million last week to £300 million this week. And who got the contracts for useless PPE? A company part-owned by a friend and advisor to Liz Truss. Did I say trust? I meant Truss. Definitely not trust. Meanwhile, Sajid Javid, former Chancellor of the Exchequer, employed full-time as an MP, also took a job at banking giant JP Morgan. Because if the last 10 years have taught us anything, it's that there's no danger at all in either MPs or bankers not fully concentrating on what they're doing. Weeks after it was proven that Russia was regularly attempting to pervert UK democracy, a report found an ongoing risk of cybersecurity incidents within the Cabinet Office due to the vulnerability of legacy IT systems. And Michael Gove is directly responsible for fixing it. Michael Gove was then found to use an insecure email account under a false name to discuss government business with Dominic Cummings. So I don't have terribly high hopes for that. The government continue to focus on the big stuff though, by converting a Privy Council room in number 9 Downing Street into a TV studio dubbed the best in the world. But then again, isn't everything in this list the best in the world? The best in the world studio isn't big enough to fit socially distanced journalists. The PM hasn't even got an official spokesman, and civil service regulations prevent one from being appointed. But the government hadn't realised that. Now folks, this may sound like some bizarre Monty Python sketch, but sadly, it is 1 week. Just one more painfully normal week in Tory Britain. Which leaves us with one question. Are you yes yet? Folks, thanks for watching. Feel free to comment on the Facebook page. Keep it civil and impersonal at all times. Davey PhD.